Welcome to Nugget 211 with Steve Groman. We will be returning to the Scientific American October 2021. As I mentioned, they had a lot of really interesting articles, and this was one of the last articles in that magazine, and it's called Scientists, Please Speak Plainly.
It goes on to say, jargon may work when talking to colleagues, but it alienates the public. And this actually happens on a lot of different topics, even current stuff. With the persistence of vaccine denial, notice how it starts out, huh? With the persistence of vaccine denial, as well as many Americans still reluctant to face the facts of climate change, even in the face of devastating floods and record-breaking heat, social media has been suffused with theories about why people don't trust science. In my own work, I have talked about how 40 years of partisan attacks on government have led to distrust of government science, and then of science generally. Boy, that's an amazing paragraph.
Yes, it is.
For many things, many reasons.
This past year, another issue has been bugging me. Of course, this is the words of Naomi here, who wrote the article. It's the way scientists talk. This is not a new concern. Many years ago, science writer Susan Hossel and atmospheric scientist Richard Somerville wrote a humorous but serious piece about how the terms that climate scientists use mean one thing to them, but often something very different to others. As you mentioned, it's not just in climate, but a lot of times it's to bamboozle people.
Exactly, and people hear it all the time on the radio and on CNN and wherever else, even current time frame, current events. Keep going.
In the climate system, for example, positive feedback refers to amplifying feedback loops such as the ice albedo feedback. Albedo itself, a bit of jargon, basically means reflectivity. The loop in question develops when global warming causes Arctic ice to melt, exposing water that is darker and reflects less of the sun's warming rays, which leads to more warming, which leads to more melting, and so on. I know that you talk about this in the meetings about how, of course, that's going to happen. You give your ice example.
Exactly, and I've been for 28 years because, is the ice melting because of global warming, or is there a warming because there's ice melting? There's no such thing as global warming the way they present it. The jargon itself, it does something to people.
And it's like if a scientist says it, they have a white lab coat, as in this picture, people believe them because they are more educated, but that just means that they've been sometimes more propagandized
and they
than the
admit
average
that they have
person.
a bias. They admit that they have a bias. They have a way of looking at it oftentimes.
We were talking to a friend one time about how the meteorologists just don't get the weather right anymore. She goes, I get the weather right 100% of the time. I throw open the window and stick my head out, and I know exactly what the weather is.
Worked for thousands of years, and everybody trusted it.
But it's true. In this whole global warming and all this, they throw out terms and information that just sounds smart.
Yes.
Intelligent. When they're emitting here, they're just saying things that don't even mean what they're saying. Well, why don't you just say what you mean? Here's a picture of when we flew to Glacier Bay from Juneau, Alaska, and we got to see the ice calving.
Big chunks will break off. Size of two-story houses sometimes break off. Boom. By the time you hear it, it's too late. It's already gone.
It was beautiful.
It was
and
awesome.
The birds sitting on the little icebergs. But it's a result of the flood.
Right. The ice came in at the time of the flood, and it's been melting back since the moment it was put there for thousands of years, and it's not going to stop until it's gone.
If you get a glass of iced tea, it's full of ice. In a couple of hours, for sure, the ice will be melted. That's just what happens.
It does. And as it melts, that glass of iced tea isn't going to be near as cold anymore, is it?
And they go on to talk about more jargon and the EPA and different things, but I want to move down to a little bit lower in the article. Examples of confusing and misleading scientific terms abound.
When astronomers say metals, they mean any element heavier than helium, which includes oxygen and nitrogen. Well, how many people know that? A usage that is massively confusing, not just to lay people, but also chemists. The Big Dipper isn't a constellation to them. It's an asterism. Computational science declares a model validated when they mean that it has been tested against the data set, not necessarily that it is valid. In AI, there is a machine intelligence, quote intelligence, which isn't intelligence. It isn't intelligence at all, but something more like machine capability. In ecology, there are ecosystem services, which you might reasonably think refers to companies that clean up oil spills, but it is ecological jargon for all the good things that the natural world does for us. And then there's my favorite, which is especially relevant here, the theory of communication accommodation, which means speaking so that the listener can understand.
Well, that's quite a paragraph.
That is an amazing paragraph, actually. People fall for stuff all the time.
The point is, even when you think you understand them,
or a word
that they're using, like validated, I had no idea until I read this article that isn't really what it meant. It's just crazy. When they are talking, we not only have to question what they're saying, we need to question the words they're using, what they really, really mean.
That's like peer-reviewed articles, peer-reviewed journals, peer-reviewed papers. Yeah, that would be a good thing if it really meant what it's supposed to mean, but it's not. It does not mean that necessarily at all, because if the person goes against the common understanding of something, they just reject it. No matter what the quality of it is, and no matter what the truth of it is, it's just arbitrarily rejected.
Well, I know that we go out and take Star Trails pictures, and you really enjoy doing that. If you haven't been to one of our meetings, I want to encourage you to do that, because Steve does a little planetarium-type presentation that people absolutely love. A lot of people don't even understand or know what star trails are, but here's a beautiful picture, and the stars move in their position around the North Star. And you want to tell them how you can find the North Star?
Yeah, you can find the Big Dipper. Most of the time you can find the Big Dipper, okay? Once you find it, in this particular picture, there's another star up that makes the end of the handle that up at the top, but I just didn't take this with this in mind. The handle comes down, then there are the 4 stars that make up the bucket of the Big Dipper. If you use the far end of that, the two far end stars, just basically where they draw a line out, basically where they line up, if you draw a line out, you will find the North Star. I just ran it for just a split second, not even a fifth of a second, and just let them start to streak a little bit, so you can actually see the Big Dipper just a little bit better. But once again, they point toward the North Star. And so you can always find the North Star, because you can almost always find the Big Dipper.
We're going to play this little video of the star trails for you, and hope you can come out to a meeting sometime and actually see it in person. It's really a lot of fun. But back to the article. Studies show that alien terms are, in fact, alienating. They confuse people and make them feel excluded. One study showed that even when participants were given definitions for the terms being used, jargon-laden materials made them less likely to identify with the scientific community and decrease their overall interest in the subject. In plain words, jargon turns people off.
Of course, the article goes on, there are words with specific technical meanings that cannot be otherwise easily expressed. And that's a very good point, because they mentioned light years here. I often talk about light years in our meetings, and people don't have a clue what that actually means. It's a long distance. That is a very, very far distance when people talk about light years.
That can't be measured, can't be proved.
It's impossible. It could only be believed. People have no idea, but they're intrigued by it big time. Technical terms used in regulatory context may be hard to change for legal reasons. And that reminds me of the point that it affects every aspect of life, because talking about legal reasons, there is a difference between illegal and unlawful. People kind of confuse the two terms. They don't even realize they're two terms, and one means one thing and the other does not mean what that one thing means. And so people are thinking one thing, but they're reading or expressing another thing. And it happens with a lot of different stuff. But if scientists could speak plainly, it would help us understand their claims and better appreciate their work. There's a good idea.
Well, I think it might expose their work if we actually knew what they were saying.
Yes, it will.
The Bible is clear.
For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit and of the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart.
Here we see that the word of God is bold, it's to the point, and there's no jargon.
No, and thy word is truth, and it's forever settled in heaven.
And if you don't understand a certain version, go look at another one and see it. It may make it more clear for you. But the word of God is saying what it's saying, and it is true.
And it means it.
All right, well, thank you.